Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, The 3 B's of a Content Development Strategy. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer. So this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. I'd like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send them over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording as well as the slides and follow-up information available on our blog at bizlibrary.com/bizblog. Also, if you'd like to download the slides for today, I put a link to them in the chat panel. On the right-hand side of your screen, I also sent out a link to the slides in the reminder email that you should have received this morning. Happy to say that today's session has been approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also send out a follow-up email within 24 hours. You should actually expect it in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. So that email will include a link to the completion certificate, a link to the webinar recording, as well as the slides and follow-up information. The most important thing on the certificate is the activity ID number. That's what you'll need to record with HRCI. So if you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. I've been working in the training and development industry now for a little over 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of BizLibrary at BizLibrary and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around human resources, training and development, and marketing. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for BizLibrary. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning development and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL, and he's also on LinkedIn. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background on BizLibrary, BizLibrary is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning online content library contains more than 7,000 employee training videos covering every business training topic. So the things like communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance training, safety training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, BizLibrary's LMS, or Learning Management System, and social learning technology platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have 2 quick poll questions for today. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a minute. So this first one is, other than instructor-led training, do you currently build any of your own online training content? So is it no, all of our training is instructor-led? No, we use any free resources we can borrow. C, yes, it's a blend. We create some and buy or borrow the other training. D, yes, we primarily build our own online training. Or E, something else.
Hey, Jessica.
Hey there, how are you?
I am well.
Good.
I am well. This is always a fascinating poll question to me. It always is interesting to see where people are going for content. So, good stuff. Those of you, we do have a few people saying something else, which is great. Let us know what that is. That would be, I would love to learn a little bit more about where people are sourcing content. Good stuff here. Not too surprised at the mix here. We'll let that run for a little bit more. Jessica, you still with us?
Yep, I'm just looking.
You were
I'm quietly observing. I was actually thinking, I'm like, well, maybe, because all these people are saying something else, I was thinking that maybe it would be been better, maybe they buy all of it. Maybe they buy all of their online training. So that's what I was thinking, actually. So I was like, what else could people be saying? And if you want to keep me from quietly thinking about it and just let us know through chat what your something else is, then we can move along. But I can also close out the poll and share the results.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
All right.
That would be good.
Okay. All right. So we've got 59% say yes, it's a blend. 20% said no, all the training is instructor-led. 10% said yes, they primarily build their own training. And 7% said no, we use any free resources that we can borrow. And then 4% said something else.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, again, about the blend. I think organizations are getting a little more savvy about sort of where employees can find valuable information online. So that's actually very encouraging to me, at least, to see that. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. All right. So one more poll question. Including classroom content, how many new courses did you build and introduce to employees in the past 12 months? So is it 0? So we're kind of trying to get an idea of how much content you're building on your own. So whether it's instructor-led or if it's online. So A is 0, B 1 to 3, C 3 to 6, D 6 to 10, or E more than 10.
Yeah, this is, I think it's obvious why we're trying to get a handle on this. We want to get a sense of sort of the velocity of our audience in terms of building content to get out there. And we have the two extremes here are kind of interesting. I'm not real surprised, but interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of influencers too. I mean, there's a lot of content that's available related to both of the poll questions, but there's a lot of resources available now that are free online that we can use. There are a lot of authoring tools or other tools that we can use that can help us build content more quickly, that have a little bit less of a learning curve. A lot of people are moving towards creating their own video, which can be a way that you can create content more quickly. And then also people are looking at the value of stuff that's already created. So for example, like BizLibrary has a large library of off-the-shelf. So what can you use that you don't have to recreate the wheel that's already been created for you? So there's a mix. All right, so it looks like we've got about 75% participated. So go ahead and close out the poll, share the results. So we've got 56% said 1 to 3 courses per year, 23% said 3 to 6 courses per year, 11% 6 to 10, 8% said 0, and then 2%, the powerhouses, said 10 plus.
Yeah, that's impressive. So we do have a small group here that are putting out a lot of content. I'd be curious, one thing I would add, kind of an informal question. Those of you who did publish new content last year, if you could let us know in chat whether it was instructor-led or online, and if it was online, what the format was and how long the course was. I'd just be curious. I know it's a lot to ask, but it would be kind of interesting to see. As we get into this a little bit, I'll be able to use some of those responses to amplify a couple of points we're going to make today. So.
All right, sounds good. So there's 3 high-level things that we're going to cover for today, Chris. So I'm going to pass the ball to you. You can outline those for us, and then we'll keep going.
All right. Well, thank you very much for getting us started, Jessica. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's make sure that this is working the way I want it to, and hopefully you see the what we'll learn slide.
Yep, we're good to go.
All right. So as Jessica said, we have 3 objectives that we want to leave you with today. Yes, we think of learning objectives too for these webinars, but here they are. We want to talk to you about why content acquisition, and that can be acquired in any number of ways, is central to successful employee training. That's first and top of the list for a reason. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about what content might work best, and this is going to be very dependent upon a lot of factors related to your organization in terms of capabilities, time, and resources. But there are challenges and advantages associated with each of the 3 B choices we're going to talk about today: build, borrow, and buy. So we'll do a compare, contrast on each of those as we get into the webinar. And the last thing we want to talk about, we want to leave you with a framework so that you can make informed choices about the content mix that's right for your organization. And if you choose to go out and acquire content, you can make a good choice as well. So I think we've got 3 real practical takeaways for everybody today. I hope we succeed on all of them. That would be a good webinar. All right, so let's lay a little bit of a framework out here. We are spending a lot of energy, time, and money. When I say we, I mean the broad collective we, on employee development. This is the ASTD, now ATD, their State of the Industry report for the year 2013. We'll see the 2014 report issued, I think, in February or so. So this data is fairly current, but this is a survey. It'll huge participation in this. But a couple of things that jumped out at me as I started to look through this survey, all the survey information. By the way, this is a great piece of data. I encourage anybody interested in this to go track this down and get a copy of it. But the challenges that organizations have with training and development, the average cost across all the participants was just a little under $1,200 per employee per year. But bigger organizations, 10,000 employees or more, benefit greatly from economies of scale and efficiency. They spend about on average, $700 an employee. Mid-sized companies, which are defined in this study as between 500 and 9,999, they spend an average of $964 per employee. And then smaller organizations spend $1,800, almost twice as much. That disparity really jumped out at me, and it really illustrates the issues we run into when we can't scale employee training effectively. We've got to be much smarter, and we have to make wise choices, and we don't have a lot of time and flexibility for wild experimentation, and we've got to really focus on what we're doing. So I think for smaller organizations, this becomes really a critical challenge to make sure you are getting the benefit you deserve from the energy, time, and effort that you're putting in to developing your employees. So you got all of those employee training trends and data points taking place in a world that is changing. The work world is changing. This is, if you don't use, I love this website, Switch and Shift, the human side of business. They post some really fascinating articles, and Jessica and I found one earlier this year, which I think was really interesting, about the trends that are affecting the way we work together. And there were 10 different ones, but we grabbed 4 that we think really get to the heart of what's happening with respect to training and development. And these are the specific trends relating to the way we interact with each other at work. There's this interesting upside-down hierarchy that's occurring. A lot of this has to do with the last element there, that demographic tsunami, where we get so many millennials in the workplace now. But think about successful teams in your organization. Think about successful managers in your organization. And you're finding that the subject matter experts for a lot of the technology innovations we're finding in our workplace tend to be our younger employees, not our more senior employees. It's an upside-down hierarchy in many ways. In many ways, we are now all, both teacher and student, when we're collaborating and really communicating and breaking down the silos in our organization. So it's a fascinating it's a really fascinating trend to study. Peer power. I mean, we're coming to work sort of used to an online, a connected kind of world that's democratic with a small d, where everybody's pretty much equal out there. Your post at a Wall Street Journal article stands side by side with Warren Buffett or anybody else who comments on an article. Everybody is essentially created equal. The internet is a great democratizing influence in our society in terms of economy and access to information, and people bring those same expectations to work. So we're very, very reliant upon each other, particularly in a world that moves so fast. It's just impossible for any individual to have between their ears everything that they need to perform effectively. But when we look to our peers for help, it becomes a really much more powerful combination, and much greater than just the sum of two parts. It's a different kind of amplification of the ability and knowledge of the workforce. And then this whole virtual reality, I mean, I kind of hinted at it a minute ago, but think about innovations that are influencing your business and your industry. Many of the most important innovative things are technology-based, web-based. You think of the rise of software as a service organizations like BizLibrary and Salesforce and other companies that provide very powerful, useful products. We've got to understand how that works and fits together. So anyway, just some interesting trends. I love this article. Definitely worth taking a look at. Jessica, that's sort of my reaction to these 4 trends. Do you react to these any differently than I do?
You know, because I don't know that I really react differently. It's less of a wake-up call. Like, it's not that I came into the workplace, I don't know how long it was ago, but later than you did. And I'm a millennial, so these things aren't really that weird to me. It's kind of like you come to the workforce and it's come to be what you expect, which could be some of the influence with so many millennials coming into the workplace, the way that we've gone through school, the way that we've learned through college. That's the reality of it. You know, it is influenced by the people that we're learning with, or our peers. There's kind of a new era of virtual collaboration and sharing. Many of the courses that you took in college, you could have a portion of it be online. It could be strictly online. So you have to really develop those skills, and it's no different in the workplace today.
Yeah, important lesson there. Remember, Jessica started off, well, this is just sort of how I live. For me, these are big changes. So that is exactly I was hoping she would get to that, but that's the point of this. So these trends are natural extensions of their lives for millennials, but for many of us, these are very big shifts in the way we think and work, which leads me to our next 2 slides. We need to shift our thinking not only about the way we work and interact and work together, and if you accept that as true, and I hope that you do, then we also need to rethink our approaches to employee learning. Traditional approaches to learning were focused on improving known skills to solve known problems. And I've been in the work world far too long, longer than Jessica's been alive, sadly, but when I first got into employee training and development, that's exactly what it was about. We have this problem, and we've got people that do these things well, so we have to improve these skills to be applied to this specific problem. That was the traditional approach to training. We need better sales, so we need to improve our sales skills, and that's what we did. We need better customer service. We have customer service issues. I mean, that's exactly what training professionals did. And that's the traditional approach. Many of us are still working in this mindset. And in many circumstances, it's appropriate. But from a strategic perspective, we need to start thinking about the next generation of learning strategies that take into account the broader business environment, all of the factors that are happening around us, both at work and away from work, that people bring with them. Just go back to what Jessica said. This is how she grew up. This is how she lives. This is natural to her, this interconnected world, the peer power, the upside-down hierarchy, those things. and that's impacting the way we do business. We need to focus on building flexibility and agility within our organization and by extension within our leaders and our employees. Organizations who can adapt to this marketplace more quickly than others are going to get ahead of their competitors. And we need to shift the focus away from learning inputs. We're going to be this much classroom training, this much e-learning, this much off-site, and focus instead on learning outcomes. That is, we need to improve sales by this much, and here are the supporting behaviors that are going to help us do that, and we currently are performing those behaviors at this level, and we need to improve performance to this level. In other words, learning outcomes is the focus with an idea that it's all about improving performance. That ultimately has to be our strategic shift in thinking. And so then if you layer that on top of this highly connected mobile world where employees, and I'm this way too, I have immediate access to any content that I want on any device of my choosing. If I'm interested in a movie time or a restaurant or finding directions to someplace, I pull out a smartphone and I find it. That's learning away from work. That's the reality of it. And we need to start thinking about creating that same type of frictionless learning experience for our employees so that it's smooth and seamless and a part of their workday. There's no barrier between the employee and the content they need to improve performance, and that's what this is all about. Build, borrow, buy content. So how can we deliver a learning experience that's content-focused that'll help employees improve performance? Well, we do it by focusing on reliability, that the content is, going to work and improve their job, that we can deliver it in a technology platform that's stable, that it's relevant to what employees are actually doing, and we have to keep a close eye on the quality of the content. People get turned off really fast to any type of training experience when we're not paying attention to quality. Now, Cox eLearning Associates consultants published a study earlier this year on Learning Solutions Forecast. The top two priorities identified in this survey, neck and neck, were develop and acquire new content and improve or enhance existing content. Content is king, and we're finally seeing that recognition permeate itself throughout the employee training and development world. We're beginning to really get our hands wrapped around that concept, and it's wonderful to see that happening. I mean, there was the cover article this quarter to Training Industry Inc.'s magazine says content is king. I mean, that's what we're seeing. It's fabulous. So if content's king, what is it exactly? Is there a next generation definition of it that will help me develop a content strategy so I can make informed choices about what I build, what I borrow, what I buy? Think about content this way. Content is anything that answers a question that we might be asking in the moment. All right, now let that soak in for just a second and think about how we've traditionally thought about learning content and see if the contrast is helpful. I entered the work world and entered the training and development profession when content was material that me or somebody in the training team or training department or HR put together, developed, designed, and delivered to employees without regard to the employees' convenience or schedules. In other words, we pulled them away from work and brought them into classrooms or did something else. And for e-learning, it's content that we pushed to them that they could access differently, but it was content that we built and pushed out. In other words, content that the organization at some level deemed important and relevant. Well, this definition turns that around. This definition is focused on the employee. Anything that answers a question that the employee might be asking in the moment. And that is when we begin to see content really improve performance, when we can answer questions that employees need answered as part of their day-to-day job. I need to understand how to conduct an effective negotiation, overcome an objection, use pains in Excel, do something else. So if you think about this definition of content, it begins to change things around a little bit. And it's anything. We're not being selective here. Okay? All right. By the way, Jessica will do this to me from time to time. She'll throw a brand newly designed slide in. This one's gorgeous. I love this illustration. A great way to think about content. I mean, it's just coming at us from all kinds of different places, all sorts of different ways. And from a strategic perspective, we want to make sure that the dots with respect to our content are connected to two important things. What are the behaviors we are trying to impact and influence aimed at achieving what business objectives? So this isn't, we're not suggesting that content just exists because it's fun. We're not suggesting that content is something that we absorb because we're fascinated by it or can be entertained by it. We're suggesting that content is critical because it improves performance, impacts behaviors, aimed at delivering business objectives. All right, Jessica, I'm about ready to jump into the 3 Bs here, like really in depth. Are there any questions that we should take before we get there?
Yeah, we do, Chris. And I'd actually add something just to get you thinking, because it's kind of an abstract way to define content. So a way to start thinking about it outside of maybe the traditional view is if you could think of, so maybe an employee poses a question. So you have an enterprise social network or a BizLibrary reuse community. So I say I pose a question on our community, and I'm asking a question about how to create pivot tables in Excel. So I pose this question, but then that also becomes learning content. And as more and more employees respond to my question, and more employees are seeing that question and seeing the answers, that becomes a learning object. So basically, by providing that enterprise social network, we're facilitating that. So we're facilitating that learning, we're providing this platform, and then our employees are generating some of this learning content for us. And actually, Tess asked a good question on top of this. So she said, not sure if this was covered yet, but how do you best integrate user-generated content? So for example, employees who have taken it upon themselves to develop their own training documents, checklists, etc. So yes, that's considered content as well. But Chris, do you have any suggestions about how else we could start to integrate that with our content that we've developed that's either formal or maybe it's something off the shelf?
Yeah, I mean, Tess is right in the middle of this definition. She's completely, exactly recognized that content can be anything, including user-generated content. And this is not a world that's linear in terms of training anymore. This is highly interconnected, no silos, democratic with a small d. Everybody can participate. And there are, Jessica, I really think that that's exactly right, is you have to think about the technology platform that you're using to deliver content to employees. And if you have a platform that can capture that content where employees can share that content with each other, then it becomes really powerful. I love this, content increases organizational IQ from exactly correct. And think about the difference between Jessica's example, where she posts a question in community where everybody can see the answer, the question, but more importantly, everybody can see the answers. Contrast that with an email that Jessica sends to somebody that she knows is an Excel expert. Who got smarter in that situation? Just Jessica and just the person she communicated with. Compare that to the broader sharing of that information where users, your employees, can supply content, user-generated content, to answer a question and improve the entire organization's IQ. That's exactly the point.
And to add another layer to that, Chris, is what if I don't know who the Excel expert is in my organization? So by posing that question, I can quickly see, okay, so these are the people that are experts or feel confident enough to speak up and talk about the topic area. So there's a couple different layers of it that you can get out of it.
Yep, exactly right. So here they are. You got 3 choices. We can build it, we can borrow it, or we can buy it. Now, user-generated content belongs over here in the build, and that requires tools and a commitment to organizing and making that work. But the build is always a great choice for organizations in some very specific circumstances and areas, which we'll identify. Borrow, what we're referring to here is free resources, articles, links, blogs, SlideShare, YouTube. There's a lot of resources out there that do add value to training. We're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that. And you can buy. You can partner with an organization that has the content you need already built and deliver it to your organizations as a part of a strategy. Now, we're not suggesting that any one of these should be exclusive, by the way. In our experience with working in this industry for over 16 years, this is a mix that we see. Now, this is just a rule of thumb, so there's no hard and fast rule to this, and it's going to vary from organization to organization. But if you think about your content acquisition strategy in this way, for small and mid-sized companies, again, going back to that ASTD thing about the scalability, about 10% of the content could be built, 40% can be borrowed, and 50% can be purchased. And then in large organizations, again, going back to that study that have a scalable team of people that can do it, building maybe makes more sense. Again, about 40% borrow. We don't see that changing much, but the shift then becomes the buy, about 10%, which can still be significant in large organizations. All right, so let's tackle each one of the B's one at a time. All right, so how do you determine what to build? Okay, because we could build all kinds of things. We recommend that you focus building content around the pillars of your organization. And by pillars, we're referring to that subject matter area where your organization uniquely holds the subject matter expertise. For instance, your products. Do you really think somebody else can train customers and sales reps and customer service reps as effectively on your products and services as you can? That's a subject matter expertise that resides uniquely with you. Build your pillars, the pillars that support sort of those key pieces of your organization. What are your competitive differentiators? What do you do really differently or better than the competition? That would be the type of content, again, that you would want to build as opposed to borrow or buy. The challenge with building content, however, is comes up a couple of different ways. Sorry about that, I left my phone on. Comes up a couple of different ways, and hang on a second here. Comes up a couple of different ways, and Jessica mentioned this earlier with authoring tools and some various, pieces of aids, job aids, and things that facilitate the building of content. We still need very specialized skills to build content. You need instructional design. If you're building video, you need videographers, you need the editing, you need the tools to put that content together. Then you have to maintain the content. Going back to what you said earlier, content's got to be relevant and fresh. So do you have the capacity to rebuild and re-update content on a regular basis? And time. It can be very time-consuming to build content. But you have to ask yourself very carefully these two strategic questions. What are the business objectives around this content area, and what do my employees need to be successful to achieve those objectives? And if the answers are really specific to your organization, then you build it. You build it. Here's an example. This comes from Roma Corp. Jesse Bray, the VP of Training and HR, said the world is changing, people are changing. To be effective, our employee training is changing to meet them where they are. And this is very specific content to this organization, and they use short-form video to create these little how-tos. You can see the video here is 1 minute and 21 seconds long. Just can take it and shoot the video about how to service this specific piece of equipment. They put a QR code on the wall next to it so somebody can walk by with a smart device if they're not sure, hit that QR code, and it pulls up that content. And it works really well. But that's a great illustration of a creative and great use of video, short-form video in particular, and identifying very specific content that they want to make sure that their employees understand, their safety procedures, and how to maintain that specific piece of equipment. So really a great illustration. And if you think about, as you're starting to think through building content, this is something else we want to really emphasize for you. I've built a lot of e-learning courses over the course of my career, and this is typically how we did it. So if you think of each apple in that basket as a learning object, what we used to call that was chunking. We would chunk the content. So I would get a course idea in mind and begin to put it together and make sure that the elements were no more than 6 to 8 minutes in length, a chunk, right, of a single identifiable piece of learning. And there's a lot of human brain dynamics that support that, you know, the feedback loop, the short-term memory converting to long-term memory. But chunking, that's what we did. And then we assembled these chunks in a logical order and packaged them together into one course. And people then would absorb the course, an individual or groups who might assign it out depending on what's happening. But that's how the content resided. It was typically in a longer course. But people don't absorb content that way. Some people need that apple, the whole apple. Some people need the slice of the apple. Some people need it sliced a completely different way. Individuals have their own specific needs. And maybe they don't need to look at that 1-hour Excel course. Maybe all they need to look at is the 2-minute part that talks about pains or how to do a pivot chart. Just that piece. But they need it right now. So do you want them to have to wade through an hour-long course, or does it make more sense to create, use Excel as an example, create an Excel course, but then make each individual element accessible as needed by employees based upon the questions that the employee is asking in the moment? And that's kind of how to think about that. That's a real different approach to doing it. And then user-generated content, great question earlier about this. We're big believers in this. Jessica dropped a quote from the classics on us here. Learning is more effective when it is active rather than a passive process. And that's been true for a millennium. Yeah, exactly. When our employees are able to participate in learning, in other words, that whole upside-down hierarchy, everybody becomes student and teacher. When employees can contribute their knowledge and content to the greater organization, our whole organization's IQ improves, to use the comment that Janette made. So really a great way to think about it, but we have to figure out how to capture that user-generated content. Here's another way to think about it. We've all heard of that 70-20-10 rule probably, and or theory, and it holds that 70% of what we need to know to perform our job effectively, we learn informally, either through experience or on-the-job training or kind of on our own. We learn about 20% socially from observing behaviors or interacting with others, and 10% in formal training. Now, as a former trainer or involved in corporate training, company training, I spent my entire career in that space, that 10% space. That's where I was. But that's only 10% of the learning going on around me. What we're suggesting is a different approach to content makes you involved in all of this learning. By having the right tools in place, thinking about content differently, you begin to participate all over. And video turns out to be a fantastic tool. Think of the way Tony Roma did it, but there are incredible advantages to using video if you're building content. It's relatively inexpensive to produce. The reach can be unlimited all throughout your organization. It's a great way to preserve knowledge. I mean, think about, you've got employees that are retiring or leaving or have a great deal of experience. Interview them. Get them on video, telling what they know and sharing what they know. Then break that up into small chunks and nuggets, in other words, that people can access when they need it. Video, think back to that 20% of social learning. We learn so much through observed behaviors. Video is a fantastic way to illustrate effective and sometimes ineffective behaviors and show how soft skills work. You know, we can talk about active listening or communication, and you know, those sometimes it begins to feel very theoretical, but we can show specific examples of when active listening yields good results. You can do that very effectively in video, and it works really well to explain complex concepts. We learn an enormous amount visually, and video really ties right into that. Jessica, it looks like we have a really good ad from Adassa, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, that would be worth bringing up here.
Yeah, so comment, it's related to the shortening of content, so making it kind of those snippets or those learning nuggets. It's especially, she said, I think it's great, too, in my case, because I'm in charge of safety, and it does get boring if it's too long. So that's another
Right.
example of content that can be especially well served either video or in short chunks just to keep people's attention. If you think about the attention spans of people today, we have a whole webinar that's about how much information we intake and how little our attention span is. So definitely a good ad, Adasa.
Absolutely. So then the third of the three Bs, borrow, or the second of the three Bs, borrow. We'll get to the third one in just a couple minutes. But borrow. There are a lot of great resources out there, some fabulous resources. I like to use one example from YouTube. There's a great series of videos in YouTube, there's a couple of different editions of it, called Death by PowerPoint. They are hilarious, and they are fabulous sort of way to teach people about effective presentations by showing how ridiculous some things that we've seen in presentations can be. That's an example of some content that I happen to think is very worthwhile. And there's a lot of good content out there, good blogs and articles, and people are posting resources. We post ebooks that we hope are helpful, but those are examples of content that can be borrowed. The trick to borrowing content, however, is it's not always relevant to your specific situation. Context is frequently not relevant to your organization either. And last but not least, you don't always know who built the content. Are they authoritative? Are they really subject matter experts? So the challenge is it credible? What's the quality like? What's the timing of it like? And it takes time for us also to really organize this content, find it, figure out what's worth using, what's not, so we can begin to add value. And that's what curating content is all about. If we're going to borrow content and get out there and look at SlideShare and LinkedIn and Twitter for articles and all these other things, we're going to have to accept responsibility for creating a context and organizing it so that our employees don't have to rely upon, unknown quantities for information. We need to kind of step up and make a commitment to doing that for our employees. Okay, the third of the three Bs. Buy. So we got build. Okay, we're going to build our pillars. Going to focus on things we have subject matter expert in. Borrow. We're going to get out and use borrowed content to explain kind of general concepts, industry information, pieces of data or knowledge or skills that aren't specialized, but we have the challenges with that. But again, not saying you shouldn't do it. But we buy. We want to also put this into the mix. Think about it this way. Why recreate the wheel? There's a lot of foundational training, skills, and knowledge that we need our employees to understand and be able to deliver and perform at a certain level. And it's, I think, pretty impossible for us to build all of the content necessary to adequately address all these training needs across our organization. I'll get to some specific challenges in just a training challenges in just a second. But the challenges with buying content: vendor. Got to find the right partner. We have to make sure we have a good selection of content so we can meet various learning styles and get the right topics out there. Is the content relevant to our needs? And cost, although I think that is a piece of this that's gotten much, much more affordable over the years. So when you're selecting an off-the-shelf content partner, these are the three factors, three areas that you need to begin to explore. What are the topic areas I can get from this partner compared to what do I need? What's the quantity like in these various topic areas? Because you don't want to end up, needing a whole wide range of customer service training and partner with a content partner that only has 4 or 5 customer service courses. You got to make sure you got the right quantity, so you got breadth and depth in the collection, and then the quality. How do they vet their content? How do they keep the content collection current and up to speed? Who produces the content? And these are all important questions that you need to be exploring. So the topic areas. Think about what's critical for your organization. I started to hint at this a moment ago, but here are common training challenges across organizations: management skills, supervisory skills, leadership, desktop computing, IT, HR, compliance, sales, customer service, soft skills, emotional intelligence. We could go on. How is it possible to build current, up-to-date content in every one of those areas that's going to meet the needs of organizations? Again, why reinvent the wheel? There's a great valid business case to be made for finding the right content to borrow with. or buy from? And do we need specialized or industry-specific content, which applies frequently? We mentioned safety a little while ago. That's kind of specialized content. Is that available for us? Then quantity, how many courses are we going to need? Does it accommodate a variety of styles? And the quality, this is really an important piece of it. Who builds the content? How is it vetted? How often is content added or updated? What's the technology used? Is this mobile compatible? Again, mobile delivery is a big, big piece of this today. And can I access reports about the usage of the content? In other words, can I make sure that my employees are in fact absorbing the content that we're providing to them? Okay, Jessica, you said for me to hold questions until the end here. I've got a few more things I can amplify here that I actually want to amplify, but it looks like a really pertinent question from Elizabeth that I think is probably worth taking.
Yeah, I agree. So this question comes from Elizabeth. She says, when choosing a training provider, a vendor, or partner, is it necessary to do a full-blown needs analysis?
Okay. Let me start. Elizabeth, that's a great question, and I'm going to answer it, but I got to do it in a little bit of a roundabout way, so bear with me here as I go through this. If we're doing a needs analysis, that is, we go to our managers and say, what do you need? We don't know what we're going to get, frankly. We don't know what we're going to get back. For instance, our sales managers may just tell us, I just need sales training. And so you deliver sales training, and then 6 months later, sales hasn't improved. Well, why is that? And that, by the way, is common. I need sales training, customer service training, so we deliver it. Everybody's happy we've done it. But we did our thing. We did a needs analysis. We asked what was needed. The problem is when we focus on a needs analysis part of this, we're missing ultimately, I think, the most important part of it, and that is what are the performance gaps that we're trying to fill? Where are the performance deficiencies that we're trying to improve? Where are we trying to reach that? So I would recommend doing a performance analysis. And you do that by comparing where you are today in terms of the behaviors, the mastery level of the skills necessary to exhibit those behaviors correctly that are aimed at actually delivering the business results. Figure out where your current level of performance is and identify where you need to get to in terms of performance. Go back to my sales example. Maybe the performance isn't broad sales. Maybe the performance gap is in sourcing leads or qualifying leads or converting leads into trials or tests, or maybe it's in negotiation skills. So when you look at the performance issues that are creating the gap, you have a much better chance to deliver content that really gets to what you're trying to do, which ties into the topic areas when you're selecting a content partner. What are the most important topic areas for my organization? In other words, where do we need to improve performance the most? Will this content collection help me do that? That's really the trick. And then the next piece of that gets over to the right-hand column. How am I going to deliver that content to my employees? Am I going to expect them to sit in front of a computer, or, which is fine, or do I want to make it available that way and also give mobile delivery a chance where employees can access content on their own device at a time of their own choosing when it's convenient? Trust me, employees will love you if you think about that and can find content that can do that effectively.
All right, this next question is from Sarah, and it relates to the buy aspect. So what are some important questions we should ask within our organization before deciding on a training vendor?
Well, I think we kind of got at that with those three high-level areas, but the specific questions that I would begin with would be, do you have, here are my business challenges, here are my training challenges. Help me understand the content that you have that can help me address those challenges. That's the first question to ask. The next question to ask yourself as you're thinking this through carefully is how many of these courses are there available? Is it 1 per topic area? Is it 20 per topic area? Is the content created in a way to address different learning styles and learning preferences for my employees? In other words, I got millennials that like one type of content. I've got folks more like me, boomers, who might prefer a different type of content. Do I have a selection in here? And then last but not least, you want to make sure you understand some very specific information about the content collection. Who built the content? Who are the content vendors or providers that you've put together for my organization to use? Where did it come from? And when you got to really understand that, because you don't want content that's just sort of slapdash thrown together. You want to make sure that the content you're getting was built by people with expertise in the subject matter, and that they know what they're doing. Then how does the organization, how does the partner vet the content? What's their review process, in other words? Do they just take anybody that wants to put content out there? And I'm not casting aspersions at any particular organization, but there are websites that you can go to buy one course at a time where anybody can throw a course up there, so you really have no idea what you're getting. So who vets this content? How often is it updated? And it's just as important to ask how frequently and how much new content is added, but also you want to know, how do you retire content? That's another piece I think that's really important. So those would be the foundational questions that I would want answers to as I'm selecting a vendor.
All right, Chris, if you want to do a quick summary of the key takeaways from today, I have some additional recommended resources and also some additional questions. So if you want to just do a quick summary, and then we'll get back to some of the other questions.
The challenge for me there is the word quick.
Right.
But I will endeavor to be brief. Okay, so the key thing we wanted to start with today was to make sure that you had an understanding of why content acquisition is so successful, so central to successful employee training. Content is king. Without content, employees can't learn anything. It's the content that changes the behaviors. Then you have to move to the build, borrow, buy. What content might work best in my organization? So you have to understand the challenges with building. Do we have the capacity, the skills, the tools to build content? Does it make sense to try to borrow a lot of content? Do I have the time to organize it and curate it? And then buy. Does this make sense to buy sort of foundational skills content, and how do I select the vendor? We gave you some good information about that. I just went through those questions to ask the vendor and potential vendor partners so you can really make an informed choice so you know you're getting what you need. Those are the key takeaways for today.
All right, great. So continue to send the questions over. Some recommended resources for today's attendees. So when you're planning your content acquisition strategy, whether you're focusing on build, borrow, or buy, you need to understand what performance you're targeting and what resources you need to be successful. So that's what this first course is related to. Many times you get that information from your manager. So this is a short course. It's called Organizational Effectiveness, Take Action to Provide the Resources Employees Need. So it's a 2-minute course, but it has some really great action plans that you can use over the course of a couple weeks, and then you can refer back to the key takeaways from the course. This next one is providing resources to define the strategic priorities for the department and align the required resources. So these are 2 really fabulous courses if you're at the beginning stages of developing your content library or content development strategy. These next 2 recommended resources, so if you're on the front where you're going to start creating your own content, we have some resources from Adobe Captivate and also Adobe Premiere Pro if you're looking to create some video content. So a wide range of courses available to you, whether you're targeting the managers in your organizations, if you need to brush up on any of your desktop and computer skills. So all these courses and more are included in the Biz Library collection. There's more than 7,000 courses. There are more than 25 topic areas, and it's set up to where you have unlimited access. So if you want to try out any of the courses that I recommended today or any of the other courses that are included in the library, you're welcome to do a free 30-day trial. Just let me know through the poll that you should see pop up on your screen. All right, so I'll leave that up for a few minutes. This next question is related to curating content. It comes from Amy. So is there a framework we can use for curating content? How do we make sure that we're providing enough context for it to be valuable to employees?
Oh, that is a good question. Amy, I don't have a real short, real witty answer for you here, but because what you're asking about requires really diligence, time, and patience to deliver the goods on that. So how do you know you've done it well? Well, you begin, frankly, by focusing in on those critical business needs. Where do we need improvement? So we want to make sure we've got content organized and easily accessible in those buckets of content, so to speak? Is it searchable? Do employees know where to go for it? Those are two really good questions. And then the third, behavior-based kind of sanity check on whether you've done a good job of curating is, are employees actually finding the content you've organized for them and then using the content? So that would be where I would start. I would start with the latter inquiry. Okay, are you finding the content we've put together? If the answer is yes, great. Now you've got a whole different set of challenges. But if the answer is no, you need to step back and maybe engage employees and managers. Okay, well, we've got this great content, so where should we put it, and how would you like it to be organized so you can access it? No shortcut to this. This is really one of these situations where, you know, we have to really embrace our role, our emerging new role as learning facilitators, or we facilitate learning and facilitate the access to information, which requires a different type of inquiry and a different kind of engagement with employees and managers. Again, I don't have a shortcut for you. I wish I did, but that's really the answer. Jessica, would you add anything to that?
I wish I would have added this into the webinar, but there's a good example of curating content from a BizLibrary client. So basically what they use our off-the-shelf stuff. It's built into the curriculum, but they've also developed something for their leadership development. They use the site Paperly. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called paper.li. And basically they curate all of these leadership and development articles and videos and stuff from around the web, and they have it set up to where it goes out to all of their leadership development participants on a weekly basis. So in addition to some of the more formalized training, they're also curating content. So they're saying, okay, these are things that we found around the web, and we think that you should be reading or that you should be interested in. So that's a kind of another fun way. They just have a link within their online training center that'll link to that, and they're also sent an email related to that. Let's see. This was an ad from Jerry related to the needs analysis question. So sorry I didn't add this comment a little bit earlier, but he said, just a caution when doing needs analysis. I found that when what managers request is not always what employees need. There's a difference in perception. So he recommends asking a cross-section of levels during the needs analysis to verify needs.
I agree completely. That's exactly the reason you don't just ask managers what they need. You do have to take it to that next step. What's really required to improve performance? And that isn't just an inquiry of managers. You need to engage all the stakeholders in that inquiry. Great comment, Jerry. Really appreciate that.
It also actually leads into this next question from Mark. So he says, I'm targeting a diverse group of employees, so everyone from entry-level employees, managers, and executives. So where should I start?
Another good question. Start with the easiest opportunities for success. Where's your lowest hanging fruit? So what's a business problem that I can impact and influence in a positive way with employee training quickly? That's where you start. That's how you think about it. You don't necessarily think about entry-level employees, managers, or executives. Think about a training problem, a business problem that you can influence with training quickly. And the reason you want to focus your energies there to start with is that gives you sort of a template for success around the organization. 1, 2, it gives you success stories that you can use around the organization. And 3, it establishes your credibility as a business partner and resource for senior executives. That's why you pick that low-hanging fruit first.
All right, so we have one more question. This one's from TJ. So do you provide any general competency mapping to your library of courses?
Yes. I highly recommend that. I think that's a great way to make sure you're getting the content targeted to the right people in the right way.
I think the question was, do we?
Oh, do we?
With our library, yes.
Yes, we do. For that very reason, it's a great way to target content. Yes, we do have competencies tagged within the collection so that you can search by competency and find that content that you're really needing. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, and I don't have a screenshot, but if you go to, there's a BizLibrary app that's free to download, but each of the different courses are tagged with both the role so the role that course would be targeting, and also the key competency areas that would be targeting. So you could do the same thing with if you have content on your own as well. So just adding tags and keywords to help employees access that content more easily, and again, create that frictionless learning experience. All right, so we're right up on time. I'll go ahead and wrap things up for today. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Just a reminder, you'll also receive a follow-up email that will include a link to the certificate as well as the webinar recording and all of the follow-up information. I'll have that up on our blog this afternoon at bizlibrary.com/bizblog. We host these webinars every week. They are free to attend. They're all HRCI approved, so hope you'll consider joining us for a future session. 2 of the upcoming webinars are how to create a competency-based training program. So yes, competency-based training is still more relevant than ever. And then 10 tips to overcome the training usage dip. So all of the upcoming webinars are on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. And again, thank you for all of the really excellent questions today. Thank you for attending with us, and thank you, Chris, for presenting.
Thank you, everybody. We hope to see you on a webinar soon.